your personal vocal journey is exactly that. It is personal to you. And I feel like this is a really important one to remember in relation to timeline. Yes, there is an overall trajectory of development that arguably is stretching out as part of a lifelong learning pathway. And if you are kind of behind that idea philosophically, then every shift, change, pace into a different gear, a different direction is part of a bigger picture context. So when we have particular projects that are kind of goals or way markers of shorter sprints, or points where we are kind of working towards something and then taking a kind of a rain check about where are we and what's going on, and am I still continuing in this particular direction, or is there a requirement for a different kind of resource or quality of attention or energy that needs to be cultivated. Those are great points to come into that deeper connection with yourself and your own creative energy, and to take ownership of that and claim that as yours and uniquely yours, because particularly in a creative space where there may be an element of drive perhaps, or desire to share that with others, and for maybe your effort or your work to be translated into a creative artifact, it is so easy to get swept up in the pressure of pace and comparing yourself to others, their process, their projects, their output, and what they're doing. And we're kind of, from the inside out, we are looking in a way that is actually creating a quality of detachment from self that kind of, it almost fragments this part of us, this perspective. So when we turn around from this new vantage point that is outside of ourselves, we're kind of looking back in, and it can feel a bit disorienting, or like we're kind of disconnected somehow from our sense of, like, we've strayed away from the proverbial path, and we're now looking back on ourselves with the kind of saturation of this perspective that has been caught up in someone else's story, someone else's narrative, someone else's way of doing things. And I'm obviously speaking to this on a level of a kind of extreme end of the spectrum, where this is actually not necessarily a helpful kind of acknowledgement of what other creative people are doing around you, and that being a source of inspiration, but it actually being a source potentially of fragmentation, dissociation from your understanding of yourself and where you are. So then it can feel then that you have somehow disconnected from your root, and to then try to find that point on the path that you were at before you kind of deviated from it and became distracted, let's use that. It can be difficult to then find our way back to center, back to this place of self-assuredness and deep connection with purpose, and also just trust that you're where you need to be, that you couldn't be anywhere else. You know, if you actually take a moment to evaluate your circumstances and the resources that you have available to you, you couldn't be anywhere else. That doesn't mean that you might not want to be somewhere else, and that could be the very thing that is calling to you in your progression and ongoing development. But that's your path and your unique learning process. It isn't that of someone else's. So until we have created a quality of self-assurance at a kind of fundamental level that is actually feels safe for us to return to, and I'm making that distinction of feeling safe to come back inside and to check in and to trust that that space can always be accessed and it can always be, you know, questioned, challenged, a kind of not heavy duty interrogation, but like that there can be reflection and yeah, that you can sort of ask yourself at points, is this, you know, am I aligned with what I really want? Is this still the kind of quality of direction, or is this fitting with my ultimate goals? And that being, for me at least, feeling like that's a more nourishing space than to say that we pursue our path and that we pursue our journey without the reality, in fact, that there will be challenges, there will be points where it feels uncertain and it feels unstable perhaps, or it makes you question yourself, it makes you question, you know, why am I doing this, or I didn't think it would take this long, and that can be kind of confrontational from an external forces point of view, that, you know, it gives you a sense of scale in terms of you might be grappling with some real world situations and circumstances in your environment that are not necessarily always supporting your pathway or supporting your trajectory, but that we don't have control over all of those factors. But if we have built enough strength and reserve and capacity to be able to keep returning home and just holding enough space to, yeah, to check in and really ask, you know, where am I? How am I? Is this still where I want to go? Do I have everything I need? What can I do to support myself? Those answers will emerge for you the more that you are resourcing from this well of inner strength. And it can sound, I'm being tentative here in the language that I'm choosing to use, because I want to keep that language open, because ultimately all this practice is an invitation to meet yourself and to commit to that as something that you are willing to do, even on days that are hard, even on days where you are kind of filled with doubt, or where your energy doesn't match what you would like, or you feel like you're flagging, or you're, moving through challenging terrain, and that because you cannot see necessarily the fruits of your labor at that moment in time, that it can feel disheartening. And I'm speaking obviously to the journey of life, in fact, and how we choose to move through life, and what we choose to be led by and inspired by. But this is why I think it is such a good metaphor to weave into how we approach our relationship with ourselves and our expression, and how we choose to explore vocal development, because everything that we are able to express first must be accessed in order to actually do the physical work of ensuring that that channel is open. We need to have some kind of clarity on what it is we're actually trying to bring out. So if we're using voice, vocal exploration, vocal development as a self-cultivation practice, and actually finding our way through sound, and giving ourselves permission to expand our capacity and expand the territory of where we can go internally in a sonic landscape, there's quite an astonishing ripple effect as to how that begins to impact other layers of your life. And that's why this work to me has been such a space of support and nourishment, and why I think it's inherently has a therapeutic quality to it. But that's very much determined by the individual and determined by that intention as to, is that how I am going to come into a space and focus on a piece of work? And I think that's important too, because this then is about the individual feeling empowered to trust what feels good and what feels therapeutically nourishing from feedback. And it's about what you have experienced, what you have found beneficial, what your body has communicated to you, what shifts you have felt. You, through that process, are learning to understand the cues that are being given to you physiologically, emotionally, psychologically, socially, spiritually. You are meeting those different elements, you're getting to know them. You know them better than anyone else external to you. So I think that's, when it comes to creative expression and using creative modalities in a way that is expansive enough and explorative enough and safe enough for people to work with them in a way that it just is inherently therapeutic. that is the nature of it. That is the potential of it. And if we cannot reclaim and take ownership of what that means for us personally and define what that means for us personally with the evidence of the transformation and development that we have experienced, then it doesn't have the same effect for someone else to put that stamp or seal of approval on it and say, right, that's it, that was therapeutic for you. Because it's about the individual. It's about taking that power back and not being afraid to actually articulate, like, well, this has shifted. This is what has helped. This is what has supported me. And if we have a vocabulary to actually articulate what has been helpful and supportive, it means we're much more easily able to advocate for ourselves and to ask for what we need and to ask for specific kinds of help, you know, whether that is with someone who has a particular specialism in a modality that is going to be able to show you a range of tools that are further going to help and support you. But if we haven't built that initial relationship of trust in those signals, we could be exploring all sorts of modalities, all sorts of interventions. And if we are actually not aware of the signals that are coming up in the body and what they mean for us personally, based on the meaning that we have ascribed to them because of what it elicits and what our unique body has expressed to us, our particular filter, our lens, our boundary, our own trauma responses, depending on what we have experienced in life, then how are we able ever to find a language to advocate our needs when we are engaging with other practices? How are we able to say no? How are we able to say that's enough, that's too much, I'm in pain? And the expression of where those edges are, because we have actually met them, we know that they exist for us, and we have the ability to translate them into a shared language with others, where we can actually speak to what is going on inside in a way that others can understand. And that for me has been the kind of what has been inadvertently revealed through engaging with this work, which I think is powerful. And that is my experience of trying to translate from a practitioner point of view, from a practice point of view, from a what goes on and what continues to happen and what evolves in you, through you, as you stay committed to engaging with working in this way. And it's taken me this length of time really to be able to find a quality of language that I think does that justice. so that whoever needs to hear this and whoever is ready to hear this will receive what they need to hear from it, and be touched by what is resonating for them, not just in the choice of words, but the energy behind them and the intention behind them, and the alignment of all of those different components.